Hey everybody, welcome back to Baking with Candy. We are going to assemble this 3-tier cake. So first you want to take a piece of tape and stick your cake board to the turntable. And then you want to go ahead and make sure that your cake is level between layers. Now I forgot to add the icing, but you want to add a little bit of icing to stick your cake to the cake board so that it won't move while you're icing it, and then apply a generous amount of icing to your cake so that you don't have to pick up your spatula while smoothing the icing. Then you want to make sure that the icing hangs over the edge of the cake while doing so. Then you want to go ahead and take a icing smoother, some type of scraper, and smooth out the sides of the cake. Now this is what I do for each and every single layer, so you don't have to do that. I don't see anybody else do it, but I like to do that so my crumb coat, I won't have to apply so much icing to my crumb coat at the end, and it helps me make sure that my cake is positioned the correct way before moving on. So now, as you can see, I switched to using the ice cream scooper to apply my icing between layers. Then we are going to repeat the process, and then chill each tier for 2 to 3 hours after each coat of icing. One good thing about making these tier cakes is that you're able to do each tier a different flavor. And for this one, I have 3 different flavors. So my bottom tier is white chocolate, my middle tier is red velvet, and my top tier is carrot. So once the cake has chilled, I am going to go ahead and apply the second coat of icing using the ice cream scooper and a piping bag. Now the piping bag helps me to apply the icing higher than the tier and to apply enough icing to cover my cake boards without cutting them. So just in case like your cake board is hanging over a little, you could just apply, a thicker amount of icing so that you don't have to cut those cake boards. Or for taller cakes, I use a cake lifter to smooth the sides of the cake. To smooth my icing, I use a pan of hot water, steaming hot water, and that helps me to get some of the air bubbles out. And as you can see, my icing, looks a lot smoother than when I first started. And you also want to keep the towel nearby so that you could wipe your spatula in between swipes as you go. Once that step is complete, I use parchment paper and the cake board to trace the size of the cake so that I could stick my dowel through the center of the cake. To position my next tier onto the cake as evenly as possible. Once each tier is complete, I use my cake band to trace a circle on my final cake board to position my bottom tier evenly. Now, I did not use anything to stick the bottom tier to the cake board, and my cake did not move during transport, but I have seen bakers use hot glue, being that it is a board between the cake and the fondant board. I use a cake lifter and a bench scraper to transfer my cake onto the boards, making sure that my cake is positioned evenly before removing the lifter. Then I use parchment paper to determine the center of the cake, to position my cake dowel accordingly. Then I piped around the bottom of the cake tier to cover gaps between the tier and the board, then smoothed it out. Once that step was complete, I used just a little bit of water, a paper towel, and my offset spatula to clean any icing off of my cake board. And I use bubble straws to support each tier. This helps to prevent the cake from leaning and possibly collapsing due to the weight. Bubble straws are easier for me to cut. And to complete this step, I stick about 5 into the cake evenly around the center dowel. Then I use a toothpick and food coloring to make the line, then cut. You can also use edible markers for this step. Then cover each dowel with icing once that step is complete. Now I'm using my cake leveler to make sure that the cake is as leveled as possible before transferring the next tier. I assemble the bottom tier to the cake board with dowels, then the middle and top tier together before delivery to have as much done as possible. I transport my cakes in totes or moving boxes. I lay them on their sides so that the cake boards fit and use the tops as a door. At the venue, I applied the drip and painted it gold. I wrapped the flowers in floral tape and saran wrap before inserting them into a cake. I am still working on smoothing my icing, but most of the blemishes can be covered with decor. You can visit me at candycakesbymissd.com to purchase the gold luster dust and spatulas needed to assemble this cake.